Hello, and welcome to the 2021 ACEC Wisconsin Civil 3D Workshop session on efficiency and stability tips and tricks in Civil 3D presented by Adam Farnsworth of Mead and Hunt. A little later in the session, Adam will provide his bio. My name is Brian Veit with Mead and Hunt, and I'll be assisting with the questions and answers portion of the session and just have a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. First, a big shout out to all of our sponsors for helping make this virtual workshop happen. Thank you. Next, an evaluation link will be provided at the end of the session, as well as a larger email at the end of the day. Please complete it to help us improve our event. Evaluation completion is also necessary to qualify for PDHs. Now let's get started with today's session.
Welcome to this class, Efficiency and Stability, Tips and Tricks for Civil 3D. My name is Adam Farnsworth, and I am a Civil CAD manager at Mead & Hunt. In the photo, I'm the bald guy with the blue shirt. I should say I'm the bald guy with the blue shirt holding the crayon. I started my drafting career back in 1999 with AutoCAD Release 14, and I've been completely self-taught. I've learned a lot from trial and error. I think the more you can break something and put it back together, the more you'll learn how it works, and you can avoid those errors. I am now an Autodesk certified professional in Civil 3D, and outside of work, I enjoy performing of any kind. I love being on stage, whether it be acting, music, or performing stand-up comedy. This class will teach you techniques and tips to enhance your Civil 3D experience. Learn ways to become more efficient in your work and steps to make your files less prone to crashing. We're going to review what Civil 3D items might be tripping you up daily. We're going to recognize how you might be creating more issues for yourself in your save files with certain techniques, and we're going to learn how to improve the stability of your files and save yourself from some future headaches. Let's start with how to clean up files. The first command is audit. You type in audit, you say yes, fix the errors, and Civil 3D will search through your file. It'll find errors and it will fix them for you. The second command is recover. Similar to audit, this will find and repair errors in your file. This one happens outside of the drawing. This was basically an audit and then it opens your file for you. The next command is purge. Purge will remove unused items, such as block definitions and layers from the drawing. You should especially look for what I call copy and paste blocks. Any blocks that you see that have a star U or a star X or an A $sign, those often happen because we're using copy and paste, Control C, Control P, to copy objects out of the drawing and then paste them back in. Dash purge is a little bit more robust purge. It's used primarily by me to delete out registered applications or reg apps. So you just type the command -purge, you type R for reg apps. On enter names to purge, stick with the star, just hit enter, and then for verify each name to be purged, type no. That will go through your drawing, find any reg app, and delete it. If you need to delete data links, you can type _data link, and right click on the data link and select the delete. Overkill is the reddest named command. What it does is it deletes duplicate objects. You can tell it multiple different ways of deleting objects, maybe objects that are right on top of each other. It can combine objects. I recommend using that command and kind of playing with it and finding out the best way for you to use it. But what it does is that ultimately it'll take duplicate items and delete them out of your drawing. WBlock exports out your line work to a new drawing. There's three options for WBlock. There's block, you can export out blocks that already exist in your drawing. There's entire drawing, which exports the entire drawing and all of your styles to a new, clean, empty drawing. Or there's objects, which will export all of the objects that you select. I'll often use objects, the third option there. I'll select all of my line work from the drawing and export it out, but I'll leave behind any file corruption issues that I have. I'll start out with a new, fresh drawing with my line work, but without the problems from before. Let's talk about what to do after you crash, because it does happen from time to time. The first thing you want to check is your file DIA variable. Make sure this is set to 1 so that you have the proper pop-up dialog box to then choose your file in a window instead of having to type out the full path in the command bar. Your Drawing Recovery Manager will pop up after you crash, and it will list your most recent saves of your file. It'll have your most recent autosave, your most recent save, and your backup file. It might also have a recover file if you've created that. Whatever is at the top of the list is going to be your most current. You can just double click that file. It'll open up as a Civil 3D drawing file, and then you can do a save as back over the original. Let's talk about temp errors and the whole saving process. Depending on how your network is set up, you may or may not experience temp errors, but I think it's important to understand how the actual saving process works inside of Civil 3D when you save a drawing. So here's the save process. When you use the save command, your .bak file gets deleted. Your current DWG file gets renamed to .bak. So that creates the new backup. And your drawing session that you are currently making edits in is in your RAM, and it gets saved out as a .tmp. That TMP is then renamed to your DWG file, and that becomes then your current save file. Sometimes, though, when it's creating that TMP and going through the save process, it gets stuck and it doesn't finish the process. But you still have that .tmp file. Your DWG might disappear, but you still have that .tmp. You won't get a pop-up window error message, though, unfortunately. It does happen within your command line, but you need to be paying attention to your command line to see it. If you do see it and you do notice it, you have two options. You can just simply rename the .tmp file to a .dwg and continue on as you would normally. Or, if you still have the drawing open, you can continue to save. And eventually, when the network frees up or you get a little bit more bandwidth, as you save, you'll finally get your saved DWG file. Now let's talk about drafting efficiently. We all have our different ways of drafting. I'm going to show you what I've learned that's helped me draft more efficiently, faster, with less errors, and hopefully some of these tips can help you. First, never use O-snaps. I know we've all learned to draw with them on, but I promise you, if you turn them off and learn to use the shift right-click method, you will get much more efficient and much faster. We all run with O-snaps, and we have multiple O-snaps running. We'll probably have endpoint and midpoint, maybe nearest, maybe perpendicular. And when we're trying to snap to a specific spot, we kind of have to hover our mouse around to make sure we're snapping to the right thing with the right icon. But if we're using Shift right click E for endpoint, I know I'm only going to snap to an endpoint. If I click somewhere that doesn't have an endpoint, I'm not going to draw to that point. So I know that every time I use Shift right click, I'm going to snap exactly where I need to, how I need to, and I can move on to the next. I don't need to double check what I'm snapping to because I know I did it correctly. Check 1, 2. All right. Here's a quick example of O-snaps versus right-click. Here's a quick demonstration of O-snaps versus a shift right-click. I'm going to turn my O-snaps on right now, and I'm going to draw a polyline connecting the various numbers here that we can see. Snapping just to the endpoints here, but I have a few different O-snaps running. So I'm going to start polyline command, snap endpoint. I'm going to grab the endpoint there, and the endpoint there, and then the endpoint there, and the endpoint there. Okay, that was pretty quick, but I'm going to turn off O-snaps, start my polyline, right-click, snap, right-click, snap, because I don't have to worry about snapping to anything else. I can go much faster using the shift right-click method. I have all of my various snaps, and I have these underlined. I know what they are. I've memorized the letters, so I don't need that anymore. But I'll give you a quick bonus tip. If you want those hotkeys underlined, if you go to your start menu and you type ease of access keyboard settings, and then scroll down to change how keyboard shortcuts work. Check this to be on, and then your hotkeys will be underlined for you. When you're drawing polylines, close it within the commands. When you have your starting point, don't connect back to your starting point, but use the close command within the command. If you do snap back to the first endpoint and then close, you're actually creating a zero length object. If that polyline gets exploded, you suddenly have a zero length object in your file you'll need to get rid of. A quick example of creating a polyline and closing it incorrectly. I'll start a polyline and I'll snap to the endpoint, and I can finish the polyline, but I can see that it's not closed. So I can either tell it to close it here, or if I were drawing it and snapping to the endpoint and then typing C to close, if I explode one of these, you'll see that I now have a zero length entity at the beginning point or the end point of the polyline. Same thing for when I closed it inside of the command. So the proper way to draw a polyline and close it without creating that zero length object is to type C or to click close within the polyline command. I'm going to type C and enter, and now I have a closed polyline. I can see that it's closed here in the properties. If I explode this, I do not have any kind of zero length object there. Also, never draw anything on the def points layer. Objects on the def points layer can actually cause file corruption. Def points was a layer introduced, I believe, for the little pick points on like dimensions. And that is it. Don't add anything to that layer. I promise you, just stay away from it. Create your own no plot layer, or use a no plot layer that exists within your template. Don't draw anything on def points. Just to make it perfectly clear, I'm going to draw a dimension here, and you can see these little tiny tick marks. That's these little pick points. These are what the def points layer is for. If I even explode this dimension, those go away. So nothing in your drawing should ever be on the def points layer. I recommend using the copy command, not Control C and Control P, to copy items within a Civil 3D drawing file. The copy command is a cleaner way to copy objects inside of a file. Control C will actually copy your object out to your clipboard, and Control P will paste it back in, creating an extra block in your drawing that is just really junk. Also, if you're using any Civil 3D objects and you have, say, a label that you want to copy, if you use Control C, you're not just copying the label, but you're also copying the label and the object. So if you have, say, an alignment label, you're copying the label plus the alignment with Control C, and Control P will paste both of those back into your drawing. You'll end up with multiple copies of whatever Civil 3D objects you might be having, alignments, surfaces, and so on. Here I have an alignment. In my tool space, you can see that it's called Centerline 1, and I have a simple offset alignment label. If I select the label and type Control C to do a copy, and then a Control V to paste, you can see that I'm pasting in both the alignment label and the alignment. Now, if I didn't realize this and I did paste it in, I can see I now have a duplicate of the alignment. I also will have, I will also have some extra blocks that are named that same thing. And I don't want these blocks with all this extra information. All of these extra blocks are other dummy blocks from various pastes or dimensions. All of this stuff is the type of stuff you want to clean out that I covered earlier. But I wanted to really highlight that anytime you use that Control V, you're pasting all that information in, you're getting a duplicate, and you're also getting a block that takes up space. Alias edit is a great command to create shorter commands or rename any command that you would like. I always recommend changing C to copy. Out of the box, Civil 3D, C is the command for circle. But I copy a lot more than I create circles, so I always change C to copy, and I create the command CI for circle. Alias Edit can take any command that maybe is a long command that you have to type out each time, and you can make it into a short 1 keystroke or maybe 2 keystroke command. One last tip for drafting efficiently is to type the command before selecting the objects. Civil 3D doesn't have to think as much when you're selecting the items whilst you're in a command. If you select items outside of a command, it has to think about each selection. But if you type your command and then select the items, then it doesn't have to think as much. To demonstrate this, I have an alignment label here that I want to copy. I'll select it before copying, and then I'll use the command copy and then select it to show you the difference between the selection time. So first, I'll select it. It takes a second there. Then I copy it, and I'm done. Not too bad. But if I copy first, and then select it, then move it, it's a quicker selection. I can quickly select things as opposed to having it kind of stutter between each selection. Let's talk about performance settings. Now these are all optional things that you can toggle on or off inside of Civil 3D, and most of them are actually built to increase performance or make life easier, but unfortunately many of them also take CPU resources and can slow you down. So I'll go through some of the performance settings that I change to keep my Civil 3D up to speed. Input search options is a long name, but it's a great command. It has a lot of different pieces to it as well. The first piece is autocomplete. Now with autocomplete, I'm sure you've seen when you're typing out a command, Civil 3D tries to anticipate what you're typing. You can just turn that off completely. But if you don't want to turn it off completely, you can also change your suggestion list delay time. We've found that changing it from 300 milliseconds to 1000 milliseconds or 1 second is a little bit better for performance issues. It'll still, if you wait for a second, it will still offer a suggestion, but it doesn't try to quickly give you a suggestion and often slow your machine down. And then there's also autocorrect. I personally leave autocorrect on because I am a terrible speller, and Civil 3D will remember our misspellings of commands and actually give us the command that we want. So it's something that's very useful, but if you don't need it, I recommend turning it off because it does use a little bit more processing. Your dynamic input is a very useful tool, but it takes a lot of resources to use. If you can set your dyne mode to 0 and turn off your dynamic input, you will have a lot more processing power available for Civil 3D, and you will have a much smoother experience with Civil 3D. If you have any surfaces or corridors that you're working on in your drawing, I recommend turning off automatic rebuild. When you're working on a surface or a corridor, every time you make an edit, if you have automatic rebuild on, it has to rebuild the surface or the corridor. Turning this off will save you some time because it's not constantly processing every change you make. You tell it when you want it to rebuild the surface or the corridor rather than every time you make an edit. Just to make sure you know how to do that, in your tool space, if you hover over your surface name, right click, you just simply uncheck the rebuild automatic option. In your options on the selection tab, there are a lot of different previews that you can try turning on or off. There's selection preview, there's command preview, and there's property preview. Now all of these are different ways for Civil 3D to show you what is going to happen or what you're about to select, and they are very helpful, but also try turning them off, see if it works a little bit better. In that preview section, there's a button that says Visual Effects Settings. Your visual effects settings is what controls what highlights when you move your mouse over it. So if you move your mouse over a polyline or a hatch or anything else and it highlights, that's your selection preview. I recommend filtering out hatches so that when you move your mouse over a hatch, it doesn't light up the whole hatch. I'm sure you've noticed when you move your mouse over a complicated hatch that your CAD will freeze up for a second. Well, let's just turn that off altogether. Just as an example here, I have a hatch, and if I move my mouse over it, you can see that it highlights, it lights up. Now, this is a simple hatch, so that's no problem, but if this were complicated, it can bog down your machine. So I recommend going into your options, and the easiest way to do that is anywhere in your drawing space, simply right-click, and at the bottom of your right-click is options. You can also type in options if you'd like, but this is the easiest way. Simply just right-click, go down to options, and under your selection tab, here's all of your previews if you want to turn them on or off. But visual effects settings, the button is here. And now I am in the visual effects settings window. And I will check hatches to exclude them from my selection preview. Hit OK and OK. Now as I move my mouse over the hatch, I no longer highlight it. Another option I always recommend turning off is hardware acceleration. This theoretically is supposed to make things work better. I haven't seen it affect anything. The only thing that you would need it on for is when you're working with point clouds. If you're not working with point clouds, I recommend turning off hardware acceleration altogether. Your tool palettes are all incredibly helpful, especially properties. I leave properties open all the time, but with those open, all of those are live, and your drawing is thinking about all the information inside of every tool palette. As you're working on items and selecting things, your properties has to think about everything you're clicking on. Anytime you make a change to your layer manager, it's making it live in your drawing. So if you can get away with it, close as many tool palettes as you can. Your properties, closing that is going to give you a significant speed boost, especially if you're having to select a lot of items. I found it especially with Civil 3D labels, surface labels, alignment labels. Every time you click on one of those, your properties has to think about it. And so it causes it just to freeze up just for a second with every click. If you close that, you'll have a much smoother and faster drafting experience. To demonstrate the lag that the properties palette can present, I will show you here. If I select both of these, there's a little bit of a lag, and then if I want to move this, it has to think about things again. If I want to move the entire label, it has to think about things again. If I close, Control 1 is the easiest way to toggle your properties palette on and off. So Control 1 to turn it off. Now if I select them, it's instantly selected. If I move something, it's instantly moved. It doesn't have to think about everything that I'm doing within that palette. I recommend you dock the command bar. Instead of having it float at the bottom in the middle of your screen, or maybe you've moved it up to the top, if it's floating, the text disappears quickly. If it's docked, your text is always readable. I expand my command bar to read generally 4 or 5 lines of text, so if there is an error on the command bar, I can be watching for that and see it when it happens. If I have it floating, then that text may disappear before I notice it. Also, and I don't know this for a fact, but I have read that docking the command bar will increase your performance. Your floating command bar can actually cause a little bit of performance lag. Docking your command bar is as simple as selecting the left side of the command bar and hovering down below your drafting window and releasing. There are a couple different ways that you can have your contour label styles mask information behind it. Contour line only masks simply the contour line. It looks great because you can see other information behind it isn't masked. Say a hatch or other line work that your contour label might be on top of, and you're only masking the contour line. But every time you make a change to the surface, or simply just flip spaces, if you flip from model to paper space and back or something like that, and it has to recalculate all of your spacing for your contours. If you have dashed contour lines, it has to rethink about all of your spacing. And that can take a lot of your CPU and can significantly slow down time moving around in your drawing, or again, flipping from different layouts. From label style, doesn't look as nice, but what it does is it's just a simple mask around your text, masks everything, and is significantly faster. If you need to have contour line only for, say, production, for your printing, I would recommend using from label style as you're working and changing all of your labels to contour line only when you're ready to print, if ever. If you can live with the from label style how it looks, just leave it like that, because it'll print much faster. If you change it to contour line only and then print, it's going to print slower. Here are some contour labels that are using the contour line only style of masking. And as you can see, they're only masking the contour lines itself. If I wanted to change the masking, I can select it, and in my properties palette, I can choose the masking type from contour line only to from label style. Now you can see it creates a mask around the text and will mask anything that the text is above. This isn't ideal sometimes for instance, the hatch that's behind this contour, that's behind this surface, I should say. But the processing time is much quicker. So if you want to change all of them, you can change them by selecting similar, changing your masking type to from label style. And if you want to change this as an overall global setting in your drawing, in your tool space under the settings tab, right click on surface, go to your edit feature settings, select or expand out your contour labeling defaults, and change your label mask type from contour line only to from label style. Now any more labels that you create for your surface will continue to use the from label style. So these have been some of my tips and tricks to recover drawings or fix drawings, to do after a crash perhaps, or performance settings that you can change to avoid crashes, or some drafting habits to change that could increase your productivity. I thank you for listening, and I believe we'll have questions now.